Hey everybody, this is the Slightest Review. I'm here today to talk to you about Star Trek Lower Decks. Now, I haven't really talked too much about the CBS Star Trek shows. I have mentioned them in other videos, my disdain for them, my hatred of them, but I've never really truly gone in full blown on why exactly I truly 100% hate these shows in a video. I did say I was gonna make a video. I still will make a video, but I'm still busy making other videos, so I'm trying to get those through first before I get to this. However, I decided to take a break from my other videos that I was making to talk about something I saw on Facebook. Just like the title of this video says, who exactly is Lower Decks made for? I'm still confused to this day, and so is the fandom. When I was on Facebook, I saw a post from the actual Star Trek website, and they revealed that they're releasing a coloring book for Lower Decks. And I stopped and I thought to myself, a coloring book for Star Trek? Star Trek? I'm just like, what teenager, young adult, or adult colors? Like, who does that? You know what I'm saying? Little kids, they color. That's what coloring books are for. And it's like, yeah, okay, I know. There was about a decade and a half, maybe two, about this special about adults who are stressed out, and to relieve their stress, they decide to color. That's a completely different topic, okay? This is not like an everyday thing when you see adults color. You do not see adults take a coloring book and start coloring. You just don't see that. So then that makes me ask the question of, once again, who is Lower Decks made for? Now, Star Trek as a whole. Star Trek is for everybody. It don't matter what age you are. You could be a teeny tiny little kid like I was when I was a little kid when I was 8, or you can be a grown adult or a teenager. Star Trek is technically for everybody. Probably not the newer stuff because it's a little too violent and stuff and gross at some points, like with the whole EGFI thing. But anyways, Star Trek is for everybody, and it's like for them to market this Lower Deck show, it's marketed for adults, but when you actually look at the animation, it looks very juvenile for little kids. If I was a teeny tiny goober and I saw a picture or a trailer or just a picture for Lower Decks, I would automatically assume that this show is meant for me, a kid. But then upon watching this show with all the grotesque humor and adult themes and everything, you will quickly find out this show is in fact made for adults. Why exactly would CBS do this? Like, I don't know. It's like misinformation. It's mismarketing. It's like, it's so confusing. And now CBS, who's partnered with Nickelodeon, is like one of their like little sister companies, they're gonna make Star Trek Prodigy. And that show is in fact dedicated for that of kids. It is designed for them. And I bet you anything right here, right now, Star Trek Prodigy will probably be the best CBS Star Trek show of them all, even though it is designed for kids and it's going to be on Nickelodeon. Not necessarily everything from Nickelodeon is stupid. Like, there's a lot of foreign properties that come over here that are actually very mature and stuff. I think there was like a British show where like kids' parents disappeared and they live in this house, something like that. That was a little bit mature. There is this magic show called The Bureau of Magical Things. That's very mature for like teenagers and stuff. So it's not all wacky slappy dappy like True Jackson or say like iCarly or something like that, you know? Or what are them Thunder people are called. And so like, yeah. And so with Star Trek Prodigy, like I said before, after all the complaining that Star Trek fans have done, I bet you now they're going to come to their senses and make this the best show ever. And then that's, of course, is going to piss off again the fandom. Because the fandom, we want the adult CBS Star Trek shows to be good. But sadly, they are not. And it's like, you know, The fandom has been divided for quite a long time. There used to be a point in time where the fandom, and when I mean fandom, I mean a true fandom, a fandom of millions, not thousands, but millions. The fandom is now split in half. There was once upon a time when the fandom used to be united as one, and we loved everything Star Trek. Then, of course, Deep Space Nine came out, and it kind of like irritated some people, but then people really realized that it's one of the better Star Trek shows there is. And even though I still love Next Generation, and I still think Voyager is better because it's more of that Gene Roddenberry style, you know. But I do think Deep Space Nine is the most realistic Star Trek there is, and therefore is probably the best in terms of realism. Now, I digress. Back to what I'm talking about. But yeah, ever since the JJ movies, the fandom got fractured just a little bit. But then when Star Trek Discovery came out, it divided the fan base because people were just in utter shock and confused by what they saw, and then their shock and confusion turned into hatred. Now, Star Trek Discovery, that show irritated me, and it just irritated me, you know what I'm saying? Star Trek Picard made me furious, and then Star Trek Lower Decks just made me sad. And it made me so sad to the point where I was just like ready to give up on Star Trek as a whole. I was ready to no longer consider myself a Trekkie because I don't want to be associated with something that I used to love so passionately that has turned into utter like dismay. You know, that has turned into utter like awe, has turned into utter garbage in my honest opinion, because that is literally really what the CBS Star Trek shows are. They are not for the Star Trek fans, they are for non-Star Trek fans. They were created to get the fans to buy their subscription to CBS All Access, which is now Paramount Plus. But it was designed to bring in non-Star Trek fans to get in more money. It was just a cash cow. And they changed literally everything about it that made Star Trek Star Trek. And it was like I no longer recognize something I fell in love with as an 8-year-old child, you know? And it's just like, it was just like this strange phenomenon I'm watching that says it's Star Trek, but deep down inside is really not. And it's just something that's just it caused me to just almost give up on the fandom. But I decided to stick with it because I went back and I decided to rewatch all the other Star Trek shows. It took a long time, a couple of months and everything, but I did, and it was so refreshing. I was like, relief. So back to Prodigy for a second, and it's kind of like I said before, I truly believe this is probably gonna be the best Star Trek show ever. I don't know about Stranger Things. That has not come out yet. But I bet you anything, the people at Nickelodeon, they are like, you know what? Even though we're partnered with CBS, we're going to prove that we can make a good show, even though this is for kids. It's going to have its goober faction, you know what I'm saying? But it's going to have its surrealness to where I truly believe fans going to be all like, you know what? That's Star Trek right there. Even though the characters look the way they do and stuff. But when it comes to Star Trek Prodigy, I'm not happy about this because one, it's designed for kids, and two, it's CGI, and I like live action, and three, the premise makes Starfleet look like a bunch of idiots and incompetent, and I don't like that. And CBS has been making Starfleet incompetent for a very long time, starting with their CBS shows and even the JJ movies. There was no way Kirk became a captain that stinking fast. But anyway, with Prodigy, the premise is this. There's an abandoned Starfleet ship. A bunch of teenagers find it and they decide to go on these like adventures and stuff. And then they're aided by a holographic Captain Janeway. So this has to be set sometime after, I want to say this is set sometime after Voyager came back home and the whole Nemesis thing. But that don't make no sense because one, Janeway is in the wrong uniform. She should have been in the Deep Space Nine uniform if this is after they came home. And this can't be before Voyager got stranded in Delta Quadrant. or after, because one, Janeway wasn't that great of a captain at that point. She had literally just became captain, so she wasn't famous for Starfleet to want to make a hologram program about her, you know? So I don't know. And that's another problem I'm having with the CBS shows. Like, what timeline some of this stuff take place in. Anyway, the fact that a bunch of teenagers found the ship and now flying around going on all these like adventures and stuff, it makes Starfleet look incompetent to where they can't even find this rogue ship and capture it. Because you know when these kids are going to encounter aliens, they're going to assume this is Starfleet. And if they make a mistake, they're going to assume it's Starfleet making this mistake. So it just makes them look incompetent. Starfleet is just incompetent now in all these CBS Star Trek shows. It's the honest to God truth, starting with Discovery. Even as Discovery Season 3 with the whole burn thing, Starfleet couldn't even figure out what caused the burn. Nobody in the galaxy could figure that out until Michael Burnham showed up. And she figured it out, what the burn, how it started and everything. And it's just kind of like all those people living in that century with all that advanced technology couldn't figure it out. But the woman who's from like the 21st century figured it out, but the people from the 32nd century couldn't figure it out. And it's just like, that just makes Starfleet look stupid. And not only that, but Starfleet abandoned Earth. When the whole galaxy went into chaos because of the burn, they got up and left Earth. And then they hid in a bubble so nobody could find them, like a bunch of little cowards. And the people of Earth, they formed their own military force, and they're just a bunch of jerks now. And it's just like Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek, Starfleet, all that stuff is it's just a nightmare now. Like, that's all it is. It is not what it used to be. But back to Lower Decks, what this whole video was supposed to be about. I remember, like, okay, I don't like the idea of Star Trek being an animation. Yes, I know the original series, after it got canceled, it got turned into an animated series. But at least when they was drawn as something I like to call super realism, or ultra realism, where it's like people are drawn not in a cartoonish kind of way, but in a super realistic kind of way. I've only seen one episode, so I can't really judge it. But, you know, I know fans like it and stuff. But it was back in, like, I think, like, what, the 70s? So it has that old school 70s style. And that's one reason why I'm just not going to watch it. But it was probably more serious than, of course, what is Lower Decks. And I remember, when I watched Lower Decks, I knew it was going to be off the wall crazy because of the trailer. But then when I watched it, I'm just like, how are these people even in Starfleet? If this is supposed to be canon, why are they so stupid and idiotic in their head? Why are they doing all this dangerous stuff? And then I got even more confused as time passed because I didn't watch it after the first episode. After the first episode, I just stopped. And I will watch like reviewers, and I'll watch clips, and I'll see like pictures and stuff. And I was confused. I'm just like, when exactly does this show take place? It takes place after Nemesis, and I know that because, ow, I tripped. And I know it takes place after Nemesis because of the uniforms that Troy and Riker on the Titan wear. Because, like, okay, on Lower Decks, they came out with these new uniforms that are supposed to take place after Nemesis. And that confused people because we know from Star Trek Picard that they wear these other uniforms and flashbacks. So it's kind of like, when exactly does this take place? Well, these uniforms were originally set for Star Trek Generations, but they decided to scrap these uniforms. They look a little too, they don't look bad, but it's a little too silly. Like, they just have too much going on. And so these outfits are reminiscent to that of the Next Generation uniforms. And so they decided to use it for this show. And so it's like, okay, so at some point after Nemesis, they went from the dark gray and black uniforms to this. But then you see Troy and Riker show up, Captain Riker, and yeah, they're wearing their Deep Space Nine uniforms. And it's kind of like, well, that don't make no sense. And then, of course, they try to get away with it by saying oh, certain Starfleet ships and certain stations, they wear like different uniforms and blah, 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 stuff like that. First of all, I hate that concept. That was a concept that was really used in TNG Deep Space Nine, where it's like those two shows came out, or Deep Space Nine came out halfway when TNG was around. And in Deep Space Nine, they decided to change the uniforms. Beautiful uniforms, by the way. But on TNG, the people who was on that show, the creative team, they didn't want to change the uniforms because they was afraid fans would not be comfortable seeing like their old cast wearing these new uniforms. They wouldn't be able to adjust. And then that way in the Nemesis movie, not Nemesis, but in the Generations movie, you first saw them wearing their TNG uniforms and you saw all the men shift over to DS9 except for the women. But with that movie, because they were going to go with these other uniforms, they didn't have the DS9 uniforms made for the cast. So what did they have to do? They had to use uniforms that the Deep Space Nine and Voyager people were wearing. And that's why some of the uniforms on the men look kind of weird. And the females, for some reason, they just didn't do it and stuff. And so it was like just, it was that reason. It was no other reason but that reason. And so they decided, because fans were so confused, they decided to make it canon to where they said that people who work in space stations wore the Deep Space Nine uniforms and people on ships wore the TNG uniform. But then that makes no sense when Voyager came around and everybody started wearing those uniforms. So yeah, it's one of those things. So of course CBS doesn't watch old Star Trek shows. They saw that there was two different uniforms on certain shows and they're like, hey, let's just, do this and everything. Now, when it comes to this show, it's like I said before, the crew is incompetent. Everybody is like an extreme goofball. Even the serious people are goofballs. I don't know nobody's name, so I have to like just describe what they look like. But I kind of hate doing, but oh well. The black lady on the show, who's an ensign, she's actually the daughter of the captain, and she's actually used to be a high-ranking officer. I think she was either lieutenant commander or commander. And she's very competent in real life, but she chooses not to be because she rebels against like authority figure and everything like that. And so because of that, she got demoted to ensign, and she acts like an extreme goofball. She drinks on the missions when she's on duty. She endangers her crew. It's just like, and she inflicted like a stab wound on one of her crewmates. And it's just bad. She's just a terrible character. Then there's the white dude with kind of like the purplish looking hair. He is just a dope. Just like a dope. But he wants to be taken seriously. He wants to succeed in life. He wants to get past being like an ensign and all this other stuff. I don't remember much about him. All I remember is that he went on an alien planet and he got chewed up by this alien monster thing, but it wasn't trying to eat or kill him. It was just like playing with him or some crap like that. I remember there was a cat doctor lady, and basically she, all these characters are somewhat based off of like other characters in Star Trek shows. She reminds me of Bones McCoy, but she's just a grumpy cat. And there was like this plague going around on the ship, and she didn't know how to stop it until the one dude with the purple hair came back and he had the goo from the alien monster thing, and she scanned the goo, and within seconds she deduced that the goo can like save the infected people on the ship, and within a split second. And it's just like, how did she figure that out so fast just by scanning it? And it's kind of like, because the show's only 20 some minutes, they don't have time to go deep into like dramatic stuff and figure stuff out. And that's the problem I'm having with this show, is that it's 20 minutes long and everything is rushed, and you don't get to sit down for an hour and get very invested in the situation that's going on in the series. You don't get invested with none of the characters really, because everything just flies by so fast. It's like bam wham thank you ma'am type stuff. Now as for the other characters on the show, I don't even remember them. I just remember what they look like. There's a green lady who's Orion. There's a black dude with some kind of cybernetic type stuff on him, similar to Geordi in 7 and 9. And it's just like, the humor is just so off the wall in this show, and it's out of place. And for the most part, I do not like humor in Star Trek. I like Star Trek to be serious. I like it to be provoking. I like some deep thinking type stuff. I like the drama. I like the action. I want to get a sense that this is truly the future, something I have look forward to, and it's like I don't get that with this show. I don't get it at all. It's like a step back, if you think about it and stuff. And it's just like, I know a lot of people are gonna say, well, if you like shows like South Park and Family Guy and you respect those shows, then you should respect this show because it's very similar to that. And all I have to say to that is shut up. Just shut up, shut up, shut up, because you don't know what you're talking about. See, when it comes to South Park and Family Guy and American Dad, I know exactly what I got myself into when I watched those shows. I watched a show about people being crude and rude to each other. I did not come into this show thinking I was going to watch a franchise that I love and thinking, oh, this is something completely different than I thought it was going to be. The humor, the crudeness, the rudeness, the yuckiness, the everything, It's kind of like, okay, it's like this. Take a show like Person of Interest, which is a crime, mystery, spy type show. It's very serious. Say they were making a cartoon out of that, you would assume it would be just like that. But instead, it's like South Park and Family Guy. And you're just kind of like, what the world is this? And this is why I don't respect Lower Decks. I can respect South Park because I knew what I was getting myself into. With Lower Decks, I had no idea. I assumed I was getting into something, and I got turned into something completely different. And it's just like, that's why I just cannot respect this show. And I also can't respect it because they stole the animation style and certain character designs from another show. No, it is not Rick and Morty. Stop thinking this show is based off of Rick and Morty just because the guy who created Rick and Morty is also working on this show. This show stole from a show called Final Space. I have never watched that show. I didn't even know that show existed. I stumbled upon that show and I was on Amazon looking for another show on DVD, and then this show came up and I'm just like, Final Space looks kind of familiar. So then I started looking and I'm just like, wow, the art design is very similar to that of Lower Decks, and the fact that they are in space, and then I started looking at the characters. They even have a cat character on that show. They even have like a little green person on that show. And it's like when you and you start looking, you just like, these people look very similar to that of Lower Decks. And I believe Final Space came out before Rick and Morty, because I think the guy who created Final Space, I think he used to work on Rick and Morty. He worked on it eventually or something like that. But yeah, Lower Decks literally stole from Final Space. And it's sad because Star Trek back in the day, they didn't steal from everybody else. Other people stole from them. And now it's the complete opposite. And it's just, I don't respect this show. And back to like the general thing of what this video is about, who exactly is this show made for? It is drawn in a style that is for kids, but the humor is that of adults. And it's like the show has no idea what it wants to be because the idiots behind it don't know what they are doing. And when it comes to shows like this, I am truly embarrassed to call myself a Star Trek fan. I am embarrassed to call myself a Trekkie. I used to be a proud Trekkie. When my other friends, they don't watch Star Trek. They don't like Star Trek. They frown and moan when I talk about Star Trek. And I didn't care because I was a proud Trekkie. But now I am, for the first time in my life, embarrassed to call myself a Star Trek fan. Alrighty, well, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.